Aegon watched you as you knelt before him, dressed properly and looking every bit of the queen that you were. Good day, wife. Aegon nodded. Indeed, I have, he said, his fingers drumming on the armrest. I have a matter of importance to discuss with you. With a wave of his hand, Aegon motioned for you to join him, before pushing himself up from his throne and walking briskly toward the small council room. He opened the door for you, holding it open as he waited for you to follow. Aegon chuckled softly as he overheard your whispered comment. Yes, here, he affirmed, ushering you inside. He closed the door behind you once you were both inside the room. The noise from the throne room suddenly muffled as you were left alone with the king. Aegon moved across the room, taking a seat himself and gesturing for you to take a seat across from him. He studied you for a moment before speaking. Have a seat, darling. Once you were seated beside him, Aegon leaned back, his gaze roaming over you. A smirk played at the corner of his lips as he observed you. You look lovely today, he said, his voice low and slightly suggestive. Aegon chuckled softly, shaking his head. You underestimate my self-control, darling, he replied, though there was a hint of humour in his tone. I am perfectly sober, I assure you. Aegon leaned back in his chair, eyeing you curiously before speaking. I've been thinking, he began, his tone serious. I'd like you to join my small council. Aegon smirked at your reaction, as if he expected it. You heard me, he stated, his voice confident. I want you to sit on my small council. A small chuckle escaped Aegon's lips. It's tradition, yes, for only men to sit on the council, he acknowledged. But I have never been one for abiding by tradition. I want you on the small council. You are intelligent and cunning. I could use those qualities on my council. As the other small council members began to file into the room, Aegon shot you a look, a silent command for you to remain silent. Once everyone had taken their seats, Aegon stood and addressed the council, his gaze briefly flickering to you. Gentlemen, as I'm sure you're all aware, I have gathered you here for a specific purpose today. I have an announcement to make, Aegon began. The council members looked up, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. They knew better than to question the king's decisions, but they were still left wondering what this announcement could possibly be. Aegon paused momentarily, his gaze locked on yours as he spoke. I have decided to appoint my wife to the small council, he declared, his voice firm and resolute. The room fell silent as the words sank in. The council members exchanged glances, some of them in shock, others in disapproval. Yet, not a single word of protest was uttered. Aegon chuckled softly, aware of the reaction he had stirred among his council. I take it you're all a little surprised, he said, his gaze sweeping over the faces of the men present in the room.
The Master of Laws, a stern and imposing figure, cleared his throat and spoke up, his voice gruff. Your Grace, with all due respect, we are a little surprised, he began, choosing his words carefully. We are not accustomed to having women on the small council. It goes against tradition.
Aegon chuckled again, clearly amused by their reaction. I understand your concern, Master of Laws, he replied, his tone casual. But I do not give a damn about tradition. I have complete faith in my wife's abilities, and I believe her insights would be invaluable to this council.
The Master of Coin, a slender and calculating individual, spoke up, his tone cautious. Your Grace, it's not just a matter of tradition. There are concerns about how the other noble houses might react to such a move. It could provoke instability and even accusations of weakness on your part.
Oh, really? Aegon said, his tone slightly mocking. And why should I care what a bunch of snivelling nobles think? As for their accusations of weakness, let them accuse me. I am not afraid of their words.
The master of ships, a grizzled and experienced sailor, piped up next. Your Grace, while I understand your confidence in the Queen, we must consider the political implications of this decision. It could send a message of instability within the realm, and that could lead to dissent and rebellion.
Aegon rolled his eyes, growing tired of their objections. Dissent and rebellion. Are you all such spineless cowards? He said scornfully. We have an army, do we not? Let them try to rebel, and they will find themselves crushed beneath our power. The room fell silent as the master of ships finished speaking. All eyes were on Aegon, waiting for his response. He smirked, amused by their worry. Besides, he said, a confident glint in his eye, my wife has the fiercest dragon in the realm, young and swift. Any rebels would soon find themselves roasted alive if they threatened us.
The hand of the king, a wise and experienced advisor, remained silent, his expression thoughtful. He took a moment to assess the room before nodding slightly in agreement with Aegon's decision.
Aegon noticed the hand's silent approval, his gaze fixing on the man. Very well, he said, addressing the council. It seems the hand has no objections to the Queen's appointment. Are there any further concerns?
The Grand Maester, an old and learned individual, cleared his throat and spoke up, his tone measured. Your Grace, while I support whatever decision you make, I would like to bring up a different concern. The Grand Maester paused for a moment, choosing his words carefully. If the Queen becomes a member of the small council, it is inevitable that the running of the kingdom will take her time and attention away from other duties that a queen would traditionally be responsible for.
Aegon chuckled, a smirk playing at the corner of his lips. You mean, her duty's to give me an heir, don't you? He said, his tone slightly suggestive.
The Grand Maester looked uncomfortable at Aegon's words, but nodded reluctantly. Yes, Your Grace, the responsibility of producing an heir is a significant duty of a queen. If those duties are neglected, it could present a significant problem for the stability of the kingdom.
Aegon rolled his eyes, growing increasingly frustrated with their concerns. Are you trying to tell me that the only purpose of a queen is to produce an heir? Do you not think she is capable of multitasking?
The Grand Maester shook his head hastily. No, Your Grace, that's not what I meant. I simply wanted to highlight the importance of balancing both roles. It is a significant responsibility, and it would be wise to consider the potential challenges and distractions that come with being on the small council.
Aegon looked at you, his gaze softening briefly before hardening again. Nonsense, he said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. You will stay. I want you on this council, and the council will just have to deal with it. The council members murmured among themselves, still uneasy with the idea, but none of them dared to protest again. Aegon turned his gaze back to the council members, his expression now all business. Now, enough about the Queen. Let's focus on the matters at hand. Master of Coin, any updates on the Treasury?
The Master of Coin, now eager to change the subject, quickly shuffled through some documents in front of him. Yes, Your Grace, our treasury is in a stable state, with a modest surplus from the recent harvests. We are expecting a few more donations from some of the major houses.
As Aegon continued to discuss matters with the Master of Coin, he slyly slid his hand under the table and intertwined his fingers with yours. His grip was firm, a subtle display of possession and reassurance. Aegon felt your hand tense up, and he couldn't help but smirk at your reaction. He lightly squeezed your hand under the table, his thumb tracing small circles on your knuckles.
The Master of Coin shrugged slightly. Just the usual, Your Grace. Infrastructure projects to improve the roads and bridges, repairs and new buildings within the city and the like. Nothing too extraordinary.
As the Master of Coin finished his report, Aegon nodded in satisfaction, his hand still holding yours under the table. Very good, Master of Coin, he said. See to it that the treasury remains stable. Any new projects we should be aware of? The council members glanced at you, somewhat surprised that you were speaking up. Aegon, however, seemed amused by your sudden involvement.
The Master of Coin adjusted his documents and looked up at you. Ah, the Eastern Docks. Yes, the repairs are progressing well. We're expecting them to be fully operational within a couple of months. Why do you ask, my lady?
The Master of Ships shifted uncomfortably in his seat, having been caught in your gaze. He cleared his throat and spoke up. Yes, my lady, there have been some complications with the repairs. We've run into unexpected issues that have slowed down the progress, but we are working diligently to resolve them.
Complications? Aegon repeated, his tone filled with skepticism. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving the Master of Ships. What sort of complications exactly?
The Master of Ships coughed nervously, clearly uncomfortable under Aegon's intense gaze. Well, Your Grace, we've encountered some difficulties with acquiring the necessary materials. There have been some shortages due to transportation issues, and the prices of certain materials have increased significantly.
Aegon's patience was wearing thin. No one thought to tell me about this. I am the king. If there are issues with the docks, I expect to be informed.
The Master of Ships looked down, avoiding Aegon's gaze. The other council members exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to react.
Aegon's eyes narrowed as he considered your words. That might be wise, he said slowly. It's not worth spending a fortune on a non-essential project just to rush it. Let's pause the construction temporarily and resume once the prices have dropped and we've gathered the necessary materials.
The room fell silent as Aemond burst through the door, his demeanor calm and composed despite his tardiness. Aemond took his seat next to Aegon. "My apologies for being late, Your Grace," he said, his voice soft but determined.
Aegon rolled his eyes slightly. Finally decided to show up, have you?
There was a mischievous glint in his eye and a hint of a smirk playing at the corner of his lips.
Aegon raised an eyebrow, noticing Aemond's stare. Something on your mind, brother? He asked, his tone curious.
I was just admiring the new addition to our council. Aemond's slight smirk grew into a full-blown grin as he locked eyes with you. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "You're most welcome," he said, his tone somewhat mocking. "I'm sure you'll bring many interesting perspectives to our discussions."
Aegon glanced between you and Aemond, a hint of amusement in his expression. He could tell his brother was trying to provoke a reaction from you.
"I have no doubt you will," Aemond replied, his tone still carrying a hint of mockery. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze roaming over you, taking in every detail.
Aegon chuckled softly, amused by the little exchange. He had always known that Aemond could be a little mischievous at times. Aegon turned to the Master of Whispers, a sly and cunning man who always had his eyes and ears everywhere. "Master of Whispers, any updates on matters of vital importance?" Aegon asked.
The Master of Whispers leaned forward, his eyes flickering with excitement. "Indeed, Your Grace," he said, his voice hushed. "I have gathered some valuable information that I believe you'll be very interested in."
"Go on, speak up," Aegon said, his expression now serious. He leaned back in his chair, ready to hear what the Master of Whispers had to say.
The Master of Whispers took a moment to gather his thoughts, his eyes roaming over the faces of the council members before settling on Aegon. "There have been whispers of dissent and unrest growing in the north. It seems that Lord Stark is not as loyal as we once believed. It is said that he is growing discontent with your rule and may be planning rebellion."
The room fell silent at the Master of Whispers' words. Aegon's expression darkened, and he clenched his jaw in anger. "Lord Stark, planning rebellion," he repeated, his voice tinged with disbelief and disdain. Does he not remember what happened the last time the North rose against the Iron Throne?
The Master of Whispers nodded solemnly. "It seems he has forgotten his place, Your Grace. It would be wise to keep a watchful eye on the north. And that is not all. There are also whispers from across the narrow sea."
Aegon noticed your discomfort and frowned slightly, his gaze flickering to you briefly before turning back to the Master of Whispers. "What whispers have you heard from across the narrow sea?" Aegon asked, his tone slightly impatient. Aegon noticed your leg shaking out of the corner of his eye. He reached down under the table and placed his hand on your knee, giving it a firm yet subtle squeeze. He didn't say anything, but it was a silent reassurance, a gentle gesture to calm you down.
The Master of Whispers proceeded. There have been rumors of a new alliance forming across the Narrow Sea. It seems that the Free Cities are uniting and planning an assault on Westeros. Their motive remains unclear, but their forces are growing in number and strength. They have also been hiring sellsword companies, mercenaries from Essos, and amassing a significant naval force. This is a cause for great concern, Your Grace.
Aegon nodded, his expression now serious. Aemond, I want you to look into this matter further, he said, his gaze fixed on his brother.
I'll ride to Essos and gather more information myself, if I must.
The Master of Whisperers raised an eyebrow, surprised at your input. He shifted in his chair, considering your words. You have a point, my lady, he said slowly. It's possible that the Free Cities are planning a surprise attack on the north. If they believe the north is busy fighting the Iron Throne, they may think they have an advantage. But we cannot risk dismissing the threat altogether.
The council members exchanged glances, surprised by the detail of your insight. Aegon's gaze lingered on you, a hint of curiosity in his eyes. It may be wise to send a raven to Lord Stark and inquire about the situation, Aegon said, his tone thoughtful. If what you say is true, it would be best to avoid unnecessary bloodshed.
The Master of Whispers nodded, impressed by your assessment. It is possible, my lady, he said, a hint of admiration in his voice. Lord Stark is known for his honor and loyalty. If the rumors are falsehoods, then they were likely spread to deceive the Free Cities.
Aemond leaned back in his chair, his gaze trained on you. And why would we do that? He asked, his voice tinged with a hint of mockery. Why would we send our men to fight for the North when they have already proven to be less than grateful for our assistance in the past?
Aegon nodded slowly, a hint of approval in his expression. You make a fair point, he said. We cannot risk our alliance with the Riverlands. If the North falls to the Free Cities, it would only be a matter of time before they turn their sights on the Riverlands. Very well. A raven will be sent to Lord Stark immediately. He gestured to one of the servants, who bowed and quickly left the room.
And what if Lord Stark refuses our offer of assistance?
Aegon nodded again. That seems like a prudent measure. He turned to the Master of Coin. How much would it cost to keep some men at the Riverlands temporarily?
It depends on the number of men, Your Grace, the Master of Coin replied, his fingers quickly gliding over his documents. 1,000 men would roughly cost about 125 gold dragons per month. But if we send a larger number, the costs would increase accordingly.
Aegon nodded in acknowledgement, his gaze returning to you. Very well, send 1,000 men. Aegon leaned in, his smile warm and approving. You're doing very well, he said quietly, his eyes locked on yours. His close proximity sent a shiver down your spine, and you could feel his breath softly brush against your ear. Aegon addressed the council members one by one, assigning them specific tasks and orders to carry out. To the Master of Whispers, he said, double your efforts to gather information on the Free Cities and their activities. I want to know their every move. To the Master of Coin, he commanded, prepare the necessary funds for the temporary deployment of troops to the Riverlands. To the Master of Ships, he issued orders to keep a constant watch on the Narrow Sea and prepare for any potential threats. And you, my brother, Aegon said, turning to Aemond. Your task is to ride to Essos and gather information on the Free Cities and their plans. Use your dragon to get there as quickly as possible and report back to me as soon as you have any useful intelligence. Do you understand?
I understand, brother. His gaze flickering over to you for a moment before returning to Aegon. I'll leave at first light, then?
Aegon nodded in agreement. Yes, first light. The sooner we have answers, the better. He regarded the rest of the council members. You are all dismissed. Get to work. As the other council members gathered their papers and left the room, Aemon remained seated, his gaze fixed on you. He leaned back in his chair and watched you intently. Aegon patted his lap, signalling for you to come over to him. Come here, he said, his tone soft but commanding. Aegon pulled you gently into his lap, wrapping his arms around you warmly, and smiled. You did well in there, he said, his voice sincere and approving. Your insights were valuable, and your strategic thinking impressed me. He pressed a soft kiss to your neck, his touch warm and intimate. You have a natural knack for this, he murmured, his breath hot against your skin. I knew I made the right choice in placing you on the council. Aegon chuckled in response to your giggle, his grip on you tightening slightly. He nuzzled his face into the crook of your neck and inhaled deeply, taking in your scent. You're welcome, he murmured, his tone slightly mocking.
Aemond, who had been watching the scene between you and Aegon unfold, rolled his eyes and let out an exaggerated sigh. Oh, brother, he drawled, his tone tinged with mock disgust. Must you two be so affectionate?
Aegon chuckled, not bothering to look at Aemond. Jealous, are you? He quipped, his tone dripping with amusement. Maybe you should find a girl of your own to occupy your time.
Aemond scoffed, shooting a sarcastic grin in Aegon's direction. And have a wife like that? I think not, he retorted, his gaze flickering over you. I won't have someone so annoying. Aemond smirked, unperturbed by your glare. Oh, come now, he teased, his tone playful. Can't I have a little fun? You make it too easy, my lady.
Aegon chuckled at your suggestion, his grip on you growing more possessive as he realized where you were going with it. A ball, he pondered, a sly smirk playing on his lips.
Why are you all teaming up on me like this?
Aegon chuckled as you kissed him, his amusement evident. He relished in the way you were teasing his brother, finding joy in your feistiness. I think that's an excellent idea.
Aemond, on the other hand, looked mortified, his face pale at the prospect of being surrounded by a crowd of young maidens. This isn't fair, he protested weakly.
Life isn't fair, he said simply, his tone amused. And you could use some female company for once, Aemond. You're far too tense.
I'm fine as I am, he insisted, his tone huffy.
Oh, lighten up, Aemond. It'll be fun, and who knows? Maybe you'll meet someone special.